Hey, really quick before we get into this episode, I got a quick story. A few weeks ago, I was actually asked to do a private training on how to start, scale, and monetize a podcast. And I was not sure about doing this training, but I did it for a group of entrepreneurs who were pretty high level for my friend's private mastermind, and they absolutely loved it. And I figured, why not give it away to some of my awesome podcast listeners here? So if you want the training, and you're thinking about launching a podcast, and all you have to do to get the training is go to my Facebook, which the link is below in the show notes for this episode. Click on my link, shoot me a message with the word training, and I will give you the free training. So hope you enjoy that. Hope to connect on Messenger and enjoy this episode. In a world where ad costs are continually rising and prospects are getting more and more skeptical about who they can trust, how can you reach new people in a way that's authentic and effective? A place where you can build trust at scale and convert skeptical prospects into raving fans and clients. Hey, my name is Luis Diaz, and you're listening to the Podcast Domination Show, the place for entrepreneurs and businesses that want to know how to build a podcast that helps them grow their business, get more clients, and build their brand. I appreciate your time. Thanks for joining me. Hey, what's going on, my friend? Welcome to the Podcast Domination Show, the video show, and the early morning show. It's like 7:30 in the morning here, but I don't know when you're listening to this or when you're watching this. But anyways, I wanted to share a story with you about a client, and I recently interviewed him. So if you go on my Facebook group, or my Facebook profile, you'll see the entire interview with my buddy Frank, who was a former consulting client of ours. And he launched his podcast about a year ago this month, July. And this is an inspiring story that I want to share because of the place he was in his life, because he was starting from nothing and now he has a cash flow positive podcast that brings him clients within a year. And he started from nothing. I get a lot of people asking, will this work for me? I don't have an audience as big as like some of my other clients. I don't know if this is going to work. Well, guess what? It does and it will. But the question is, will you work the process? Will you stick to the plan? And will you be able to execute? Well, even when times are hard. So that's the premise of this story. But at the end of the day, I want to share with you the 3 core things that I took away from our talk or our interview the other day, because they're super important towards your success as a podcaster and your success as even an entrepreneur, as a communicator. And again, what I want you to do after this episode, after you listen to this, is go to my Facebook personal profile. Just type in Luis Ryan Diaz on Facebook in the top left-hand side. And you will find, if you scroll down long enough, you'll find my interview with Frank Rich. It's my buddy's name, Frank Rich, from the Superhuman Life podcast. And it'll be a good one for you to learn and to listen to, just to hear a story. But number one, the first thing he did on this, or on his podcast, was he was vulnerable. He was vulnerable. And I say that because it's a hard thing to do. And it doesn't seem like very, it's not a big secret, right? Share people your secrets and share with people like your feelings and things that you may not want to share. Frank was coming from a place in his life that was really tough. He was fighting a lot of battles on a lot of different fronts, but he was open and honest to sharing all of those with people. And I think that, number one, is what resonated with him. And when you listen to, I want you to think back to a time someone told you, or you heard something uncomfortable on a podcast, or a little raw. I was like, wow, I can't believe he shared that, or she shared that on a podcast. That's going to go out to the world. And you probably don't forget it. And you don't know exactly what they said, but you do know how they made you feel. And it's said that, people, they don't remember what you say, but they do remember how you make them feel. And I think that's very true especially for podcasters. Even for entrepreneurs, if you're communicating a message about your products and services, if you're communicating a message about your story and what you learned and what you did to help you go from where you were before to where you are now, it's super important you know that. So that's number one, vulnerability. How can you get real with your audience? How can you get to a point where you're able to share things that are deep and maybe helpful, but they're hard for you to share? And if you're someone who's getting into into podcasting as an entrepreneur, you need to be able to share those stories about your earlier days. Number two is focusing on the mission. And I talk about this with our launch clients all the time in our podcast launch formula program. The mission. What's the mission of the show? Not what's the call to action, not what's the theme of the show, not what's the show concept. What's the mission of the show? What are you trying to accomplish here that's bigger than you, bigger than one person? His mission was something he drilled in 2 to 3 times every single episode. And that's why he was able to get people to focus in on where they were going. And he built a small army of people who were like him in a similar place and wanted help with their situation. So a couple of things he did, I'll share you some tactical things he did. In the interview, he mentioned he shared it on the standard intro, so the intro that's pre-recorded. He also shared it on the intro that he recorded specifically for that episode. And then he'd normally share it, some form of his mission or the mission of the show, somewhere in the middle of the episode or towards the end or something, right? Just as it just came up naturally in conversation. So that's number 2, sharing the mission. What is the mission? We're going to be launching a 5-day challenge here pretty soon. That's one of the things we're going to be going over, especially early on in the days. Like before you even get your podcast name, you need to figure out what's the mission. And that'll help you shape the name. That'll help you shape the people you're trying to attract and the people you're ultimately trying to help. So number 1, vulnerability. Number 2, what is the mission of your podcast? And make sure you weave that in every single episode. Like for me, example, on this podcast, the mission is to help you launch and grow a successful revenue driving podcast. I've actually gone away from that. So that's something I need to step up on. I need to take ownership for, and I actually need to do a better job of and recommunicating that mission of helping entrepreneurs and business owners who are online mainly launch, grow, and monetize their podcast. That's number 2. The third one here, I'll leave you with before it leaves my mind here. So we got vulnerability. We've got being able to communicate the mission. And then the last part here is leveraging his network. So he had some contacts, some people who he worked for, some people who he worked with who already have podcasts. He knew his ideal collaboration partner really, really well, meaning he listened to their podcasts multiple times, and then he shot them actually a Instagram voice note of, and what he did in those voice notes was he recommunicated that he understood their mission. So he listened to their podcast to do that. And then he asked them to do a podcast swap. And he mentioned this over and over again in the interview that he did this 3 or 4 times. And it didn't work every time, but the few times that it did work, it was able to drive his traffic up higher. It was able to help him acquire listeners faster. So collaborations, guys, the more you can do those, the better. For example, I landed 7 interviews yesterday. And that'll be probably for another podcast episode. So stick around if you want to listen to that, or just shoot me a DM on Facebook. But the power of collaborations. Do you understand that person's message? Do you understand that person's goal? And can you shoot them a DM on Instagram and say, hey, I know you're trying to do X, Y, and Z. I love your show. I've been listening to it for a while. I've got a podcast that's growing steadily. I'd love to have you on, or I'd also love to do a podcast swap with you if you're open for it, and make it super, super valuable for you. It's just a value because I value your time. That's not an exact script. That's just off the top of my head, but that's something you can do. It's simple. So those 3 things you can do to grow your podcast, or if you're launching better, I want to help the people who really are launching their podcasts, because you guys have the best chance for success right now in this economy and this world that we're in right now. So remember, vulnerability, get real, get raw. Don't get too real and raw, but don't share stuff that you shouldn't be sharing. Number 2, the mission. I'm blanking on the points here. The mission. Focusing on the mission. Weave it into your concept 2 to 3 times every single episode. And then last but not least, collaborations. How can you give an amazing experience to a guest in exchange for getting on their platform as well and doing a cross promotion or something? So 3 things right there to grow for my buddy Frank. Frank grew his podcast, like I was saying, from 0. I don't know how many downloads he's getting now. I do know that he's probably made over 20 grand with his podcast to date in the year. Of course, he's doing other marketing. He's putting out offers on emails and stuff, but the podcast is his flagship content, which is something I'm super proud of to be a part of. But credit to Frank, and guys, go check out his show, The Superhuman Life. You'll see what he's all about. I'll catch you later. Thanks again. And make sure you stick around because I got a free gift for you after this that you'll hear about in a sec if you're listening to this. Peace. Hey, thank you again for listening. Remember, if you want the free training on how to start, scale, and monetize your podcast, then go to Facebook, search for my name, Luis Ryan Diaz, and shoot me a message with the word training, or the link to my personal profile will be below this episode. Just swipe up if you're on an Apple device, and it'll be there. So again, shoot me the message with the word training if you want the free recording on how to start, scale, and monetize your show. I'll catch you later. Thanks again. Bye for now.